I've never been one to believe in ghosts or supernatural occurrences. Life was busy and modern, far removed from the realm of the inexplicable. But one night, something happened that changed my perception forever. My name is Arvi, a 30-year-old professional, and this is the story of the night I encountered something I still struggle to comprehend. It was a Friday night, and I had just bought the latest PS5 game release. The excitement of diving into this new adventure was all-consuming. I settled into my plush couch, controller in hand, and lost myself in the virtual world. Time slipped away unnoticed, and before I knew it, the game was almost done, the clock showing 2 a.m. In my rush of excitement and focus on the game, I had completely forgotten about my new bike parked in the cellar. Ever since I got it, I had been paranoid about the stray cats in the parking area scratching the seat. Covering the bike each night had become a ritual, one I couldn't afford to skip. Hurriedly, I paused the game and grabbed the bike cover. The apartment was eerily silent as I made my way to the cellar. The hallway lights flickered slightly, casting long, dancing shadows that added to the sense of unease I tried to shake off. The cellar was deserted at this hour, half of the lights turned off to conserve energy. The darkness seemed almost tangible, pressing in from all sides. My footsteps echoed unnervingly in the empty space as I approached my bike. I bent down to cover the bike, and that's when I heard it. A faint whisper, almost like someone calling my name. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. The sound was so soft, so menacingly familiar, yet completely out of place in the empty cellar. Trying to brush it off as my imagination, I continued with the task. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Panic surged through me as I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. Suddenly, a chilling draft swept through the cellar, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, heart pounding, and saw her, a ghostly figure, resembling the vengeful spirits from horror movies. She had long, disheveled hair, her face obscured, and she moved with an unnatural, jerky motion. Fear rooted me to the spot. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The ghostly figure reached out with long, pallid fingers, her touch icy and unbearable. I stumbled back, desperate to escape her grasp. I could barely breathe, my chest tight with terror. The ghost's hair moved as if alive, revealing glimpses of her ghastly face, twisted with malice and pain. I screamed, the sound echoing through the empty space, but there was no one to hear me. Just when I thought I was done for, a small figure darted into the periphery of my vision. It was one of the stray cats. It hissed fiercely at the ghost, its fur bristling. To my astonishment, the ghost recoiled, her form flickering as if destabilized. Taking the chance, I bolted towards the stairs, the cat following close behind. The ghost let out a wail that pierced the night, but I didn't look back. I raced up the stairs, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I slammed the door to my apartment shut, locking it and collapsing against it, gasping for breath. The cat, my unlikely savior, sat calmly by my side, its eyes glowing with an almost supernatural awareness. I realized it had saved me from a fate I still couldn't fully grasp. Since that night, I've never gone out after midnight. The experience left a mark on me, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. I still have the cat. It stays with me, a guardian against the shadows that lurk in the dark. Some nights I still hear whispers, but I know better than to investigate. If you ever find yourself alone at night, remember my story. There are things in the darkness that we're not meant to understand, and sometimes it's better to let them be. I never thought a simple shopping trip would lead to the most terrifying experience of my life. My name is Mark, and I was 20 years old when I stumbled upon an old store in the quiet outskirts of town. The sign read, "Antiques and Oddities," and the place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to check it out. As I stepped inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and musty books. The store was crammed with peculiar items, vintage furniture, ancient books, and bizarre trinkets. An eerie silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. My eyes caught sight of a small, intricately carved wooden box on a dusty shelf. It seemed out of place, almost calling to me. I reached out and picked it up, feeling a strange energy emanating from it. The shopkeeper, an old man with piercing eyes, appeared out of nowhere and warned me, "Be careful with that. It has a dark history." Ignoring his warning, I bought the box and brought it home. My apartment was small but cozy, filled with the usual clutter of a 20-year-old's life. I placed the box on my desk and went about my day, not realizing the nightmare I had invited into my home. That night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. My heart pounded as I searched for the source of the noise. The box had fallen off the desk and lay open on the floor. I picked it up, feeling an icy chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the room temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath in the air. Strange things began happening. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered, and I heard whispers in the dead of night. One evening, as I sat at my desk working on a paper, I heard the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter echoing through the apartment. It was faint, but unmistakable. I lived alone. The next night, I woke up to find the box had moved again, this time to the kitchen table. I hadn't touched it. I started to feel like I was being watched, a constant prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I decided to set up a camera to see if I could catch anything unusual. Reviewing the footage the following morning, I saw a shadowy figure move across the room and stop at the box. It was grainy and hard to make out, but it was definitely there. My heart raced as I replayed the video, hoping it was a trick of the light. But it wasn't. One night, I felt a pressure on my chest, as if something was sitting on me. I couldn't move or scream. I saw a face hovering above me, pale and twisted with hollow eyes staring into mine. The paralysis broke, and I scrambled out of bed, gasping for air. Desperate for answers, I started researching the box. I discovered that it was a Dybbuk box, a container said to be haunted by a malicious spirit. The stories were horrifying, filled with accounts of death and madness. I knew I needed help, so I reached out to a local paranormal expert. The expert, a woman named Sarah, agreed to help and came to my apartment the next day. As soon as she entered, she sensed the dark presence and explained that the spirit attached to the box was growing stronger. She warned me that it would eventually consume me if we didn't act quickly. We conducted a seance to try and communicate with the spirit. The air grew thick and the room darkened. Sarah chanted in an ancient language, and the box began to rattle violently. Suddenly, the spirit manifested, a grotesque, shadowy figure with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. The expert screamed at me to destroy the box. I grabbed it and ran to the kitchen, where I threw it into the sink and set it on fire. The flames roared to life, and the spirit let out a blood-curdling scream before vanishing into thin air. The box burned to ashes, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted immediately. The expert warned me that while the box was destroyed, the spirit might still linger, looking for a new host. She performed a cleansing ritual in my apartment, and I hoped it would be enough to rid me of the entity forever. Days passed without incident, and I started to feel normal again. But the relief was short-lived. A week later, I was lying in bed when I heard scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. I tried to ignore it, but the noise grew louder, more insistent. I got up to investigate and found long, deep scratches on the walls of my bedroom. The activity escalated. I would wake up with bruises and scratches on my body, and objects would be thrown across the room with incredible force. One night, I heard a voice whispering my name, followed by a sinister laugh. I felt a cold breath on my neck and spun around, but no one was there. I reached out to Sarah again, begging for her help. She returned and sensed that the spirit was indeed still present, feeding off my fear. She suggested another cleansing ritual, this time more powerful and elaborate. We gathered the necessary materials and began the ritual at midnight. As Sarah chanted, the room grew colder and the lights flickered. A low growl emanated from the shadows, and the walls seemed to close in on us. The spirit appeared again, more menacing than before, its hollow eyes burning with anger. It lunged at us, but Sarah held it back with her incantations. The battle lasted for what felt like hours, but Sarah's determination never wavered. With a final, powerful chant, the spirit let out a deafening scream and disintegrated into nothingness. The room fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted once more. Sarah assured me that the spirit was gone for good this time. Life slowly returned to normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I took extra precautions, hanging protective charms and sprinkling salt around the doors and windows. I had learned my lesson and vowed never to dabble in the unknown again. Even now, years later, I still feel uneasy when I think about that box. The memory of those terrifying nights haunts me, but I take comfort in knowing I survived. If there's one thing I learned, it's that some things are better left alone, hidden away in the dusty corners of old stores.
I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, spirits, the supernatural. Those were just stories to scare kids. But a few months ago, something happened to me that changed everything. My name is Sarah, and I'm 35 years old. This is my story, and I swear every word is true. It all began on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was driving through a sleepy old county, the kind with cobblestone streets and houses that had stood for over a century. I wasn't in a hurry, just enjoying the drive, when I noticed something by the side of the road. It was a large, ornate mirror leaning against a fence. A faded tag hung from it, reading, "Take it home for free." Something about the mirror drew me in. It was beautiful, with a gilded frame that looked like it belonged in a grand mansion. It seemed out of place there, just sitting on the side of the road, abandoned. Without really thinking, I pulled over and got out of the car. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I decided to take the mirror home. When I got home, I decided to place the mirror in my bedroom. It was the only room in the house that felt a bit bare, and the mirror seemed to fill the space perfectly. For the first few days, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then, strange things began happening. At first, it was just an odd feeling of being watched, especially when I was in bed. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just my imagination. One night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I felt a sudden cold tug on my blanket. Startled, I sat up and looked around, but nothing was there. My heart raced as I checked the room. The mirror stood silently in the corner, its dark surface reflecting nothing but shadows. I told myself it was just a muscle spasm or the blanket slipping off the bed, but deep down I knew something was wrong. The next day, I noticed objects in my house had been moved. A book that was on the coffee table had somehow ended up on the floor, and my kitchen chairs were slightly pulled out from the table. I was certain I hadn't touched them. Then, while I was in the living room, I heard a loud crash from the bedroom. I rushed upstairs to find the mirror still standing, but the dresser next to it had been knocked over, and all its contents spilled onto the floor. That night, the activity escalated. As I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, I heard faint whispers coming from the mirror. They were unintelligible, but they sent chills down my spine. Then, without warning, the door to my bedroom slammed shut with such force that the walls shook. I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding as I felt a sudden drop in temperature. The room was freezing, and I could see my breath in the air. I tried to ignore it, but the sounds only grew louder, banging on the walls, creaking footsteps in the hallway, and that relentless whispering. I covered my ears, hoping it would stop, but it was no use. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went silent. I slowly uncovered my ears, but before I could catch my breath, she appeared. The ghostly figure of a woman standing right in front of me. Her face pale and twisted in agony. She vanished as quickly as she appeared, leaving me shaking with fear. I knew then that the mirror was the source of it all. Desperate to stop the haunting, I tried to move it out of the room, but it was as if the mirror was glued to the spot. No matter how hard I pushed or pulled, it wouldn't budge. The house seemed to come alive with activity, with doors slamming, windows rattling, and objects flying off shelves. It was like the mirror was feeding off my fear, growing stronger with every passing minute. The final straw came when I woke up in the middle of the night to find the ghostly woman standing at the foot of my bed, her hand reaching for me. I screamed and scrambled out of bed, but she was gone as soon as I blinked. I knew I had to find a way to destroy the mirror, or it would destroy me. I spent hours researching, finding stories of others who had encountered cursed objects. One account mentioned a mirror similar to mine and described a ritual to break the curse. The ritual required a specific chant, a circle of salt, and exposure to the light of a full moon. It seemed far-fetched, like something out of a horror movie, but I was desperate. I gathered the materials and waited for the full moon. That night, I stood in my bedroom, the circle of salt around the mirror, candles flickering on the floor. As I began the chant, the air grew thick and the temperature dropped again. The ghostly figure appeared in the mirror, her face twisted in rage. As I continued the chant, the ghost began to thrash violently within the mirror, as if she was trying to break free. The room shook, and objects flew off shelves, crashing to the floor. I could feel a force pushing against me, trying to stop the ritual, but I kept going. The glass of the mirror started to crack, spider webbing across the surface as the ghost's screams filled the room. The chant reached its peak, and with one final desperate scream, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. The room fell silent. The ghost was gone. The air was warm again, and I could finally breathe. The pieces of the mirror lay scattered on the floor, now nothing more than broken glass. I knew the curse was broken, but the experience left me scarred. The house was peaceful once more, but I would never forget what I had gone through. I never told anyone what happened. Who would believe me? But I learned a valuable lesson. If you ever come across something that doesn't feel right, trust your instincts and walk away. You never know what kind of evil might be attached to it. So that's what happened to me just a few months ago. I never imagined a simple mirror could turn my life into a nightmare. It's something I'll never forget. And I hope by sharing my experience, I can help someone else avoid the same fate. My name is Emily, and I'm 28 years old. I've always been a rational person. Someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural or things that go bump in the night. Ghost stories were just that, but what happened to me and my family shattered that belief. It's something I've tried to forget, but the memories cling to me like a dark shadow refusing to let go. This is the story of how a simple birthday present turned our lives into a living nightmare. A nightmare that we're still trying to escape from. My father always had a knack for finding the strangest gifts. Back in the 90s, he brought home something that would change our lives forever. A ventriloquist doll he purchased from a small dusty magic shop just outside Santa Rosa, California. The shop was hidden away, almost forgotten, with old posters peeling off the windows, and the air inside smelled of musty wood and incense. As he paid for the doll, the cashier, an elderly man with unsettling eyes, warned him in a low voice.
You know, when you put your hand inside the doll, he's going to come alive.
My dad laughed it off, thinking it was just a creepy sales pitch. If only we had known then what we know now. When my dad brought the doll home and gave it to my sister Marty, she was ecstatic. She had always been a fan of ventriloquism, especially Edgar Bergen and his dummy Charlie McCarthy. The doll was dressed in an old-fashioned tuxedo with a fixed smile that seemed to stare right through you. At first, it was just a toy, something Marty cherished and played with. But soon, things started happening. Things we couldn't explain. The doll's expression, though made of hard plastic, seemed to shift when no one was looking. It was subtle, but enough to make us uneasy. The first night the doll was in the house, I remember hearing footsteps in the hallway. It was late, past midnight, and everyone else was asleep. The sound was faint, almost like the soft tapping of small shoes on the wooden floor. I got up, thinking it was our dog, but when I opened my bedroom door, there was nothing. The hallway was empty, just darkness stretching out before me. I checked on Marty, who was fast asleep, the doll placed neatly on her bedside table. I convinced myself it was just my imagination. A few nights later, things escalated. We started finding the doll in different places we hadn't put it. One morning, Marty came running out of her room, pale as a ghost, saying the doll had been on her pillow when she woke up, even though she had left it on her desk the night before. We tried to brush it off, saying she must have moved it in her sleep. But deep down, we all knew something wasn't right. The doll's eyes, once just painted glass, now seemed to follow us as we moved around the room. One night, I woke up to the sound of something scratching at my door. It was a slow, deliberate scratching, like fingernails dragging across wood. I froze in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, but fear kept me silent. The scratching continued for what felt like hours, then suddenly stopped. I stayed awake until dawn, too scared to move. When I finally mustered the courage to check, I found deep scratches on the outside of my door, as if something or someone had been trying to get in. The situation grew even more terrifying when we started hearing screams in the middle of the night. They were blood-curdling, echoing through the house and coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. My parents would run into our rooms, thinking we were hurt. But we were all accounted for. The doll, however, was always somewhere nearby, its eyes fixed on us as if it was enjoying our fear. I could feel it growing stronger, feeding off our terror. One particularly chilling incident occurred when Marty was alone in the house. She was upstairs in her room when she heard the faint sound of a child laughing. It was a soft giggle at first, almost playful. But it quickly turned sinister. The laughter echoed through the halls, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. Marty ran downstairs, only to find the doll sitting in the middle of the hallway, its head turned toward her. The twisted smile on its face wider than ever before. She swore she saw its lips move, whispering her name in a voice that wasn't hers. The final straw came one night when we all heard the sound of someone walking in the living room. It was the middle of the night, and all of us were in our beds. The sound was unmistakable. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, pacing back and forth. My dad grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made his way down the stairs, with the rest of us following close behind. When we entered the living room, we saw it. The doll was sitting on the couch, its head slightly tilted, as if it had been waiting for us. My dad swore he had locked it in the cupboard before going to bed. We were all terrified at this point. My dad decided the doll had to go. He tried burning it in the grill outside, but no matter how much lighter fluid he poured, the flames wouldn't touch it. The doll sat there in the fire pit, completely unscathed, its smile almost mocking us. We even tried cutting it up with a kitchen knife, but the blade wouldn't pierce its plastic skin. It was as if the doll was made of something impenetrable, something otherworldly. Desperation set in. With every attempt to destroy it failing, my dad decided to throw the doll away. He drove it to the nearest landfill, tossing it into a dumpster filled with trash. We felt a sense of relief when he returned, thinking it was over. But the next morning, as we were getting ready for breakfast, the doll was back, sitting at the kitchen table as if it had never left. None of us could explain how it had returned, and the fear in our home grew even stronger. My dad was done playing games. We knew we had to get rid of the doll once and for all. He decided to bury it in the backyard, thinking that if we encased it in cement, there was no way it could come back. We dug a deep hole near the old oak tree, and my dad placed the doll inside, its lifeless eyes staring up at us as we filled the hole with cement. Even as the last bit of concrete was poured, I couldn't shake the feeling that the doll was watching, waiting for its next move. We moved away not long after that, leaving the house and the doll behind, but the memory of it still lingers. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up with the feeling that something is wrong, that somewhere, that doll is still out there, waiting. I've heard stories of cursed objects before, but I never believed them until now. I can only hope that the cement holds, and that the doll never finds its way back to us. But deep down, I know it's only a matter of time. That was my story, and even now, it sends chills down my spine to think about it. But I know I'm not the only one who's experienced something unexplainable. If you have had a paranormal encounter or heard a story that kept you up at night, I want to hear it. Send in your stories, and maybe your experience will be featured in one of our upcoming videos. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Your support is what keeps this channel going, and with your help, we can continue bringing you more terrifying tales. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't just in our imagination. See you in the next video. Bye.